Thank you, Chair Conference. And you saw from that film how many of our members currently are in dispute. There are currently 33 disputes happening as we speak, and I'll talk a bit more of those as I go through the presentation. So thank you very much for the welcome. I just want to say in the opening that how immensely proud I am to have been elected General Secretary of Unite. We stand in a really particular place, Unite, because we are now going to be the vanguard. We are going to be the vehicle that can change what is happening to working people. This morning, what I wanted to do, rather than just do, a sort of 20-minute speech, was to talk a little bit and have a bit more of a discussion about why I stood and the programme that I stood on. And as Tony said, we're going to take a Q&A. I hope there's lots of questions. I'm going to have lots of conversations about the programme up and down the country. That's already started, and I hope you find it exciting and also something that we can tangibly do. One of the main reasons that I stood to be General Secretary, and the reason that really drove me to do that, was that I absolutely feel now that the workers' voice has to be heard. We are in a situation where the politicians have quite frankly failed. We saw this in COVID, they were nowhere to be seen. And what we can see happening now, and we've been seeing it happening for years, but particularly in this COVID crisis, we can see that workers are being yet again set up to pay for the crisis. We remember what happened in 2008, we were all there. We had the financial crash. Every single negotiation I went into after 2008, pretty much for the next 4 or 5 years, the first thing the employer said when I sat down was, we have to have a pay freeze because of the financial crash. Even though in lots of cases they had the ability to pay, they could pay, but they thought if they say that, it means that everyone's going to go, okay, we understand that, our workers will take a pay freeze. And that is exactly what they are setting us up for now. We can see it already. I'm seeing it already. I know you're seeing it already. Those workers out on strike are definitely seeing it already, where they are saying now to workers, you accept the pay freeze, you accept the pay cut, you accept being laid off, you accept all of these things, because if you don't do that, then the company will go under, or this will happen, or that will happen. There are times, of course, when that is true. There are absolutely times when that is true, and of course we work with companies on that. But there's also a lot of cases where that, quite frankly, is rubbish, and they are saying it because they want to get away with the things that they're putting forward. So I go back to what I said right at the beginning, that I do believe that our union, we are uniquely placed. We have 19 sectors of the economy where we have members. We in this union, in this room, have 7 of the 9 critical infrastructure areas of the economy. Some call them the commanding heights, but effectively those sectors that essentially keep the economy moving. 7 of those sectors Unite leading. The other 2 sectors, 2 other unions lead, but I'll talk a bit later how I'm hoping to work with those other unions. So we are the vanguard, we are the vehicle for change, and we are the ones now that need to put a stake in the ground to say that we will not accept what is going to happen to workers. And the programme that I want to lay out to you, the programme that I stood on, that I was elected on, the essence of the programme is exactly that. How do we create more power in the workplaces? Of course, my slogan was jobs, pay and conditions, because I believe as a union we have to concentrate on the jobs, pay and conditions of our members in the first instance. That's what we're here for. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But by doing that, by focusing on jobs, pay and conditions, by making sure that we build in the workplaces, by people seeing that that is who we are here to protect you, we will grow as a union. And of course, what will happen as a result of that is that we will grow in our communities, and I will come back to that, and then we can drive the politics. And I just want to say a couple of things before I take you into some of the specifics, to really, I suppose, slay the dragon on the politics. A lot of the things, said in the election, elections are elections, but a lot of the things that were thought in the election was that somehow me saying, let us focus on jobs, pay and conditions, meant that we're abdicating the political arena. That is totally not where I am. What I believe, though, is that we can't keep asking in the political arena, whether that be through Labour or the Tories who happen to be there now, we can't be asking, lobbying, demoing, and then getting told to bog off and not winning anything. And so how I see the political piece is, of course, we're involved in politics. We're a trade union. Fire and rehire matters. It could not have happened had it not been in legislation. If it wasn't in legislation, they couldn't do it. But the fact is that it is there. But how do you get rid of something like that through legislation? And what the political part of the manifesto that you'll see is that I want to build two power platforms, one in the workplace by concentrating on jobs, pay and conditions, because that is what workers expect us to do, but also to become part of the fabric of communities where we can drive together the political and we can drive the answers in the political arena with some power. There is no reason why this union cannot drive those agendas because we have the power in the union. And so a lot of why I stood was really to bring us back to our workplaces. I'm not saying we weren't there, but in a really deepened way, so to deepen our industrial focus. And by deepening the industrial focus, we will win for workers, and by winning for workers, we will grow, and we will then drive through on the political pieces. So just in front of you, you've got a presentation. I'm not going to go through every single page of it. It's going to come up in front of me or behind me, so you might want to just see what's coming up, or of course you can follow, and if you want to write questions as we go, that's fine. And broadly, I'm going to take you through a number of the pages, but I just want to start off on page 1. And you'll see there that I talk about a comprehensive programme that I'm laying out. My manifesto was 8,000 words long. I'm not even sure my own team read it, to be honest, but you know, I quite liked writing it. It was 8,000 words long, and the reason that I did it in such a detailed way, it had 6 sections. The reason I did it in such a detailed way is, first of all, I wanted people to know what I was standing on, that it was really important that if they were voting for me, that this was what I was standing on, it was clear, and that people could see it, but also that I could be accountable. That if I won the election, that people would be able to point to that document, the manifesto itself, and say, well, hang on, you said on equalities, this is what you do. You said on industrial, this is what you do. You said as a General Secretary that this is what you would do. So the manifesto is, you know, quite detailed, but hopefully a good thing, so I can be held to account. But also within it, it does talk about us looking at how we do our business, at all of our operations, to make sure that we are focused absolutely in the workplace, where it matters and where the resource is needed. We've just heard this morning a debate on facilities, where we've got people in our union in areas who can't even get time off work to do their trade union duties. And that is something we have to change. Now, the government won't change that. Labour's not in power to change that. So how do we change that? And that's a lot of how the manifesto looks. It looks at what we can change as a union, and I think there are things we can, but it also looks at how we can drive political change also. The other piece that comes into the manifesto is where I talk about the structures in our union. And of course, we've all come from different heritage unions, and we're all very proud of the culture and the unions we came from. And what I talk about in the manifesto is that we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it is true that for most of our heritage unions, the structures we have were set over 100 years ago. And I know for the union I came from, it was well over 100 years ago. And that's because the structures were set to deal with predominantly domestic employers. We set up structures so we could deal with domestic employers because that's in the main who we were dealing with. But of course, 100 years on, most of the employers I negotiate with are multinational employers. They're employers that have offices in this country, they have offices in other countries, and so the question is, how do we defeat when a multinational employer makes decisions about our lives, sometimes not even in this country, sometimes in this country, but sometimes not? How do we bring them to the table? How do we make them listen to us? And that is why one of the core tenets of the programme that I've put forward is combines. And I'm going to come back to that, and people have mentioned that this week, and I will talk a little bit about what that looks like. But it doesn't mean that anything goes. What I mean by that is all the structures we have are there. All we're doing is adding on to those and saying, okay, if we deal with multinationals, I was with HGV drivers the week before last. Most of their issues are going to be dealt with multinational employers. How do we make sure we win? And I'll come back to some of those. I think it's worth just looking, and on page 2, and it's up behind me also, is what we are now going to be facing. I spoke a little bit about that at the beginning, 2008 on steroids. We know what is out there for us. We've been through it before. I believe it is going to be deeper and it's going to be more pain unless we can try and stop some of it. And the first thing that I would just say on this is the piece around the emboldenment of employers. And we have all dealt with hostile employers. I mean, used to, in my former life, that's what I did most of my work on. I did leverage. I was involved in situations where there were hostile employers because we needed to win some of those campaigns. But what we're seeing now is that the emboldenment of employers are coming for employers that we did not expect it to come from. Now, British Airways, we've had our fights with them. We've been on strike against British Airways on numerous occasions, some very high-profile strikes. But what they did in the middle of COVID, where they effectively served notice on 36,000 workers, they woke up one morning to be told that in 45 days' time, you will all be fired, brought back on lower terms and conditions, and then rehired back into the organisation. Some of those workers were being asked to take 30% pay cuts. Pay that they had put up over years and years and years of being in the union. All of that pay, all of those conditions, all of those agreements. They were being told, actually, it means nothing because we can do this to you now because you can't go on strike because you're on furlough. So when an employer like BA starts to have those deep and quite frankly, abhorrent practices where they are essentially triggering fire and rehire, they pay set for the rest of the employers. As soon as British Airways did the fire and hire, we pushed back a lot of it, but you know, there was still stuff that they got away with, quite frankly, and we'll have to come back for that. But when they did that, it set a load of other companies in train. We'd hardly heard about fire and rehire. We dealt with it, obviously, in redundancy situations, but we hadn't really dealt with it in the way that it was being used in the pandemic. And so a cycle happened where now we have 1 in 10 workers who have been fired or rehired, have been the subject of fire and rehire. So the emboldenment of employers is getting worse. They are getting more confident. They are thinking they can do exactly what they want, and that is, for a lot of them, what they're doing. And you may have some employers who don't sit into this bracket, and we may say, well, actually, they're not going to do it. But we have to be prepared. I don't think the BA workers would have thought for a moment that their employer would have been the first to do that on a mass scale. We're also seeing suppression of pay terms and conditions. We're seeing it in public services, of course. That's where we see it ordinarily start the first. But of course, then we are seeing it also seep into other sectors as well. And so the question is, how are we as a union going to push up pay? How are we going to make sure that our pay and our agreements and all of those things that we fought for are not suppressed? And I hope some of the things I talk about in the programme will look at that. There's also increased attacks on our reps. We heard about this from some of our reps yesterday, and our reps are being attacked. There is no doubt. And the reason they're being attacked is the employer thinks the way to get in what I want to get in is I just take out the union. And we all know that the union are the reps. That's who the union is. They're not interested where we are in Holborn. The union are the reps in the workplace. We have got, as we sit here today, 10% less reps than we had at the start of this process. And some of those have been made redundant and all of those things that happen, but a lot of our reps are being attacked, and we need to understand what's happening and defend it, because if we can't defend our reps, we do not have a union. And that is something that I talk about in the programme also. The other 2 parts that I want to just say on this slide is about the mental health crisis. And yesterday people said far more eloquently than I could ever say about what was happening to our reps, to our members, to our communities as a result of the mental health crisis. I know, because I'm speaking to reps all the time, that actually our reps are feeling this from 2 angles. First of all, they're getting blamed for what's happening. I know the BA reps were under huge pressure because they were blamed for what British Airways were doing. They were trying to defend it, but they were also blamed by people for it. And also what's happening to our members. A lot of the time, they're going to our reps and they're asking for help through our rep structure. So the mental health crisis in our union, in our communities, across all ages, is also something that we need to think about. How are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do as a union to try to deal with it? And of course, you see there the cuts in the community. And I talk in the manifesto and I talk in the programme about us becoming much more part of the fabric of communities. How can we do that in a way that means that we are ingrained in our communities? That it's not just we come in because there's a strike or we come in because something's happening, that could we have the powerhouse of the industrial and the community together? Could that happen? And we have to put resource in, quite frankly, and that's again something I will be talking about. So I just wanted to talk a little bit around my first days in leadership. Obviously, I'm relatively new to the position. It's only been a matter of weeks, so I'm getting my feet under the table at the moment. What I think is important about how we lead and how we are in leadership positions is, of course, accountability and transparency and all of those things, but it's also about what we actually do. And one of the things that we did within the first 48 hours of the election was to bring together our reps in dispute. Not for us to take over the dispute. They know their dispute. They understand exactly what it takes to win the dispute. But it was to make sure that they had the resource that they needed. And we've set up a temporary disputes area, department, call it what you like. But effectively, this is going to grow. It will have within it forensic accountants. It will have researchers. It will have organisers. It will have a whole range of different things where if you are in dispute, then you can access in. One of the things actually that came up the most when we had those conversations with stewards outside of mobilisation, outside of leverage being asked for, was the piece around phone banking. Just a simple thing. Look, we need to have a phone banking system that we can get around people for the vote. Or we can do it, we just want you to give us a system where we can do it. And of course, we've now set up a system where you can log in and phone bank and load up people's details in order for you to do that quickly and effectively, which is a really important, simple tool that just can be done and has been done very quickly. There's also, you can see there, our finance director. We have a new finance director, Ed Sabisky, as you know, died very suddenly, around about 2 years ago. And we had a temporary finance director who did, the best job that they could. But was now time for us to put somebody in who could lead the finances of the union, that you were able to ask questions of, that you were able to get reports from, and that also is in there. And you'll see also there's a member hotline to the GS's office. We've had literally about 1,800 calls in a very short space of time. Somebody said to me the other day, Sharon, are they all complaints? And I said, well, there's some complaints, but a lot of them are around about how that people think we should drive the union forward. A lot of them have been around ideas, and I want that to keep happening and people to keep using that as we move on. So moving on now to the sections in the manifesto, and I won't keep you here for 2 days because I could talk about this for 2 days, but I'm just going to give you a bit of a brief overview on what's in there, and obviously you can ask questions about that as we take the Q&A session. So unashamedly, the biggest part of the manifesto, of an 8,000 word manifesto, it takes up 4,000 words of it, is this piece around back to the workplace, jobs, pay and conditions. And just to reiterate, this isn't saying what's gone before has been wrong. It was a different time. There were different opportunities that we may have had before. We don't have that time, and we certainly don't have those opportunities. So the idea of the industrial section is very much about what can we do? What is our responsibility as a union, and how do we do that? And I'll take you through some of those. The second area is our equalities area. This also, by the way, is very much in the industrial part. I see a lot of the issues that are affecting our equalities section, like the ethnicity payback, the gender pay gap, all of those things. There are industrial solutions to some of those things. So, of course, that is part of the industrial section. But there are other pieces that are in the equality section also. There is also a section on our democracy. We need to make sure that the union is open, transparent and accessible to our members. And so we're looking here at what we call a democracy commission, but trying to find out, are there barriers to people being involved in the union? I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to that point. There's also our retired and community membership, because of course this is a very critical part of our union. It makes us very different actually from other unions. It's a strength that we have, and I'll talk a bit about some of the ideas that we have for those areas. There's also across our nations, our union, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, Gibraltar, the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. These are parts of our union. They are very significant parts of our union, and particularly around the nations, about how we can have the nations have more power, if you like, how there can be more devolvement of some of the pieces, but also about how we can do some pace setting, and I'll talk a bit about that when I get there. And finally, you'll see the section on what I've called a workers' politics. And this is really about how can we drive the issues that are affecting workers through the political arena and win them. You know, we are stuck with the Tory government. That is not going anywhere anytime soon. Labour don't seem to be stepping up to the plate, but we have issues we need to be dealt with. And how is that going to happen? And of course, I talk about that in those sections also. So just moving into the first section, the industrial programme. And I've said some of this in the opening around the multinationals and the fact that we are now dealing with multinationals and have been for many years. How do we win against these multinationals? Governments can't even win against these multinationals. So how are we going to put a strategy in place that is going to allow us to do that? And so the part of the manifesto that deals with this is what we call combines. And I know that people are very familiar in the room about combines. Some people may not be familiar. But essentially, this is where we bring our reps together by sector. And so if you take energy, for example, we bring our energy reps together by sector. If you take finance, you know, we'd bring our finance reps together by sector. And I'll talk a little bit about how that would work in a moment. But effectively, it's saying, if we want to win issues for our energy workers, it's better for us to try and do that by widening and deepening that collective than people trying to negotiate in different areas, sometimes around the same thing, and which means that we have got a less chance of winning. So the idea of the combines is that we essentially have industry combines, combines that make industrial sense. And how they are looked at is pretty much, if you have a sector, what are the companies that make up 75% market share? Who are the big beasts in these sectors? And if we have got responsibility for a sector, for example, roads, transport, commercial and warehousing, and the biggest beast in that sector, when you bring that sector together, is Amazon. So every time our members are in recognised sites and they battle for a pay rise and they battle for hours and they battle for all of those things, they are up against the fact that the biggest part of their sector is being dominated by a non-union employer. So effectively, a non-union employer is setting pay in that sector and driving pay down. And every time they go in to negotiate, that is what they're up against. So the idea of the combines is, who are those top 10 companies in a sector? Let's bring the reps together. If we're not recognised in one of those top 10 companies, then we need to have organisers in there to get them recognised so that we can have these combines pace setting the industrial strategy. And I'll come back a little bit on that. The other thing I just want to say about the combines themselves is that we want to, or we're looking to, plug resource directly into the combines so that we would be plugging in the forensic accountants that I've spoken about. And in pretty much every negotiation I go into before I became General Secretary, because it was around hostile employers, pretty much everyone, I would make sure I had a forensic look at their accounts. Not me, we got people in that did that for us. And there's no reason why we can't have that as part of the union's normal work. We need to know when we're going into a negotiation where the investments are, where the money is, where the movement of money is, what makes the company vulnerable, what are they doing in terms of AI, what are they doing over the next 5 years. We need to know that as negotiators before we walk in the room, whether that be over a pay claim or whether it be over a closure. These are things that we want to bring to our negotiators and make sure you have them as a matter of course. There's also having legal directly into the combine, legal assistance that goes directly into those lay-led combines, because that's what they will be. They'll be led by the reps, lay-led combines in relation to that. Political directly into those combines. So that if you want to drive, for example, the renationalisation of buses, if that's what the combine says that is important for us politically, then you have people in the combine who will drive that. That you don't have to say, okay, well, how are we going to get that done? The combine will almost have their own resources, if you like, to drive through certain things. And I'll talk a little bit about how that works in practice. So if you go on to the next slide or the next page, you can see there that I talk about this top 10 that I've described. And you could have the top 10, you could have the bottom 10, you could have the undercutters. It doesn't really matter how it's made up. But let me just give you an example of how this is already working in practice. If you take the finance sector as a whole, and you say, okay, this is it's called the finance and legal sector, you have banks within that, you have insurance companies within that, and you have legal within that. But of course, they're very different. They've got very different employers a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time they've got very different decision makers. And so at the moment, I'm working with some finance reps on a home working agreement in finance. Because, of course, home working agreements are going to be critical. If we don't pace set what a good home working agreement looks like, it will be a very bad agreement. They'll think, well, you work from home, you can deal with anything we tell you to deal with because you're working from home. So we've got to make sure that the first home working agreements are good agreements. They're stakes in the ground agreements. And so how the banking combine is working, or would work, is that it's not mixed in with insurance and mixed in with legal, that we bring together the reps from the top 10 banks, or the banks, or the top 7, however many it is. We agree one home working agreement, rather than 50 different agreements all over the show, one home working agreement, and then we table that agreement at each of the CEOs at the same time, on the same day, and say, this is Unite's home working agreement. And how I've done this before in different arenas is we do what's called a trigger agreement, where you get an employer to sign, you put it in the drawer, and when all of the 7 sets of employers have signed, the agreement is triggered. So you don't get this competition argument that we always get when we're trying to get the employer to be first to sign. What we're creating is industry bargaining. What we're creating is sector bargaining. And there's no reason why we can't do that. If we have got around the table the reps from the biggest companies in transport, or the reps from the biggest companies in finance, or the reps from the biggest companies in energy, then we will set the pace. Because, of course, the key reps around the table, underneath them is the organisation, and then, of course, we drive through those terms and conditions. The same is similar for automation. People were speaking about this a little bit yesterday and today. If we don't get good automation agreements, if the first ones aren't good ones, people spoke about the right to disconnect, a whole range of different things that is going to come up in home working and automation. If we can't get good agreements in, bad agreements will become the norm. And so if we want to get a good automation agreement in the bus industry, for example, is the better way to do that by bringing the core bus reps together from across the 7 major bus companies and driving it that way, rather than doing it in a way where everyone's trying to battle for their agreement. So the idea of the combines is it's another layer on top of what we already have to try and deal with what is happening to workers out there in terms of multinational employers. You'll also see there that I talk about organising and the unorganised. And into the combines, it's relatively simple. Organisers will be in there working with the reps about where you think we need to be to organise. But of course, there's a whole sway of sectors. Hospitality is one of those, where whilst we've got some great work on, somebody mentioned Dave Turnbull yesterday, there's been a huge amount of work done. Can we now put serious resource into organising in the hospitality industry, looking at those big companies that dominate hospitality and then driving a campaign to win in relation to that? And of course, you see Amazon there also. Moving now on to page 7, I just want to mention, and we've got our international guests here, I just wanted to mention transnational combines. And this again actually came up in the collective bargaining debate yesterday, and I agreed wholeheartedly with all of the delegates that came up and spoke very well in that debate. Because The obvious thing now is that as we begin to put the resource directly into how we drive pay terms and conditions in the workplace, that we widen and we deepen our collective, that we put the resource in to make sure that we have stake in the ground campaigns. There are some campaigns we just cannot afford to lose. The obvious piece on top of that is, how can we look at transnational combines? Is it possible? Now, of course, we have EWCs, and of course there are other things where companies come together across countries and our reps come together across countries, and it doesn't interfere with that at all. But actually, if you take Amazon as an example of a company and what they're doing, when you look at Amazon and you look at the makeup of Amazon, Amazon is sort of split in two ways. It has the e-commerce side that you and I know, and then it has something called AWS, Amazon Web Services. And that is where they make most of their money. 67% of their profit is in their cloud. It's not in what you and I know Amazon to be. And the way to lever Amazon to a deal on recognition is for the UK, Germany, and America, because we are the three biggest profit-making areas for Amazon. We make most of their profit in the cloud. Our governments use their data, they use their services. So we make most of their money in those three countries. So why can't we bring together ourselves in those three countries? I'm already speaking to a number of people around that currently. Those countries seem to be very happy with us doing this. And we can create an Amazon union, not legally, but for the period of the campaign, where we are driving Amazon at the same time from three different countries, which, by the way, they cannot ignore because we are the countries that are making the most of their profit. And that's just a reality. They can't sort of move from all of those three countries at the same time. So we need to come at them in a way that they can't deal with how they're being pincered. And so transnational combines, I think, are something that will be very important and will hopefully develop with yourselves as we go forward. You'll also see on there the point around education. And I came up through my union's education. I left school at 16, and I came up through my union's education. And I remember when I did, and I remember the tutors that I had, I remember what they said, I remember them saying to me, Sharon, if you don't have your collective, you have nothing. You have got absolutely nothing. It doesn't matter about anything else. That's the most important thing you need to have. And so one of the things that we're investigating, and of course, you know, I need to speak to the education team and look at all of this in detail, is it possible for us to bring our education back in-house? You know, because for me, if we are bringing up new stewards from energy or aerospace or finance or within our public service areas, then should we be ourselves having much more bespoke courses around that? Should we be having reps from those areas coming in and speaking to the stewards? Should we have the courses written by our reps? Should it be done in a slightly different way? Now, like with all these things, it sounds easy, you know, when you say it, but I absolutely believe that the education of our reps is really critical to the confidence that we're able then to give members, because our reps feel confident and then they're able to go out and they're able to give confidence. And so we are obviously looking at that and seeing how we can maybe do that. And then the other piece that you see there is in relation to the extension of work voice pay. So I think hopefully most people in the room is familiar with work voice pay. This was something that I'd set up you know, a while ago, maybe I think 5 years ago now. And the premise of work voice pay at the time was that stewards could access what we could access. So the pay claim generator, hopefully people are aware of that, but this is where essentially you put in your company, you put in some different things, and you're able to generate a pay claim pretty much within 5 or 10 minutes. It comes out in a booklet form in relation to that. And I want to extend what we will call, you know, it's an area where it's negotiation tools, extend that area so that we can put more and more tools in for our negotiators to be able to use. As we spoke about accounts, we spoke about legal, but there's other things that we could absolutely do. The other thing I think is important, just in terms of the industrial, there's lots more things in the manifesto, but I'm just trying to pick out the main ones, is Unite's position on leading and pushing back some of the core things that we know are happening under the radar. And people may know it was going to happen in 2024, but the retail price index will not be tracked past 2030. I suspect they're going to bring that forward. And that means, we all know, we use the retail price index. That is one of our core barometers for pay. If there's an ability to pay above that, we should go for more, but that is a core barometer of pay. It's CPI, and CPIH has been slipped in. RPI is hardly ever mentioned now, actually, when you hear commentators talking about inflation and what is happening in the economy. And I don't think that we should accept that on Monday, or whatever day it is, that they decide to say the ONS, Office for National Statistics, is not any longer going to track RPI. Because, of course, overnight, we're now down nearly 1%, because that's normally the difference between RPI and CPI. So there are things that we want to be able to do in Unite. We called it Unite Investigates previously, but things where we need to take on the mantle. So we will be continuing to track RPI. I'm working with Loughborough University. They are fully aware of how this is done. It's not rocket science, actually. When you look at it, it's just a series of baskets. It's much better for us to have those baskets than the CPIH baskets. And we are going to continue mapping RPI, and we're going to call it a Unite Bargaining Index. So that actually, that is what RPI was. They've suddenly slidden us down over here. But alongside that, we want to be able to say, this is the ability to pay of your organisation. This is what they made, and this is what you're going in with your pay rise on, so that we can push up if we can, rather than obviously always being pushed down by a number of different things done to us. I just want to move on now to the second area, which is the equality section. And just say a couple of things around this, because, in the manifesto, I called it action, not words. This isn't to say what's happened in our equalities areas has not been good. Of course it has. There has been a huge amount done. We are a leading union, if not the leading union, in equalities. We have vibrant committees, we have a whole range, we lead debates, and all of those things. So all of those things stay. Of course they do. But the question is, can we add to it? And one of the things that I think is really important is that in the same way that I'm talking about the top 10, as I say for shorthand, in each of the sectors, who are the big beasts that are driving pay? Are they driving pay up, or are they driving pay down? Equally, in the equality sections, when you look at the number of members we have, 290,000 women, 80,000 BAEM, 97,000 young members, 25,000 LGBT plus declared, 20,000 disability declared. When you look at those figures, what are the companies that our members from our equality areas are in? Where are the main areas that our equality members are? Because could we, in the same way that we do for the industrial section, if you like, could we bring together our reps from the areas where we have the highest proportion of BAEM, for example? And could we then say, okay, well, we know that COVID has affected BAM workers in a different way, and are there agreements that should now be put in? We know there's an ethnicity pay gap. So are there agreements that we should be putting in with these companies so that we can have tangible agreements in our hand to say that as a BAE member in Unite, this is what we have won industrially. So that we start with the areas where we have most of our BAEM membership. Now, this is obviously a conversation, I'm sure people will have thoughts about that, but the idea is that we can push up as well industrially in our equalities areas also. I also talked there about budgets. I think it's really important that lay membership committees or combines, or call it what you like, have budgets. And with budgets come responsibility, but also it means you can plan for the next 3 and 5 years. And we're going to have to do that. We're not going to be able to react and win. We're going to have to be proactive in the way that we drive forward the union. Because, of course, as I said at the beginning, we have an onslaught coming towards us, and we're going to have to think differently about how we deal with those things. You'll also see there that I've spoken about development centres. And in organising, we were able to have a department with 140 people in there that was much more reflective of the world of work. And the reason it is that we held development centres often, where we were trying to encourage people from different groups, from different areas, from different backgrounds, to come and work for the union, to come onto development centres. And very often, they miss it, or they haven't seen it, or they don't feel, actually, they've got the skill sets to do it. So opening up that door of development centres to encourage more people from our equality areas into our union, but also being reps of our union and seeing, how we can do that. And all of these things, of course, will be in conversation with our different structures that we already have. The other piece on equalities that I just wanted to say on this page was about justice campaigns. We have a long history in our heritage unions and in Unite of being part proudly of justice campaigns, of Black Lives Matter, of a whole range of different campaigns. And we sponsor a lot of those campaigns. And we should sponsor a lot of those campaigns. But we should also lead some of those campaigns. And one of the things that we are looking at, and you'll see this in the community piece, is that can we begin to lead in some of these arenas also? Because otherwise it can appear that we're abdicating responsibility by saying, okay, well, we'll sponsor it, but we don't have to actually really do anything about it. And I think, obviously, that's another conversation we're having with the equalities section. If you move now on to the next slide, you'll see some other pieces around the equalities area that I just wanted to touch on briefly. One of those is bargaining guides and templates. And of course, there are some of these already, and all of these things are good and all of these things will stay. But people were talking today and yesterday about automation. And one of the things around automation, outside the other pieces that we are going to need to deal with, the whole piece around employers investing more in automation now. They're speeding it up because, you know, these machines don't get COVID, so of course it's in their interest to do that. And they want to put workers on the scrap heap. How do we make sure that things like a 4-day working week without loss of pay is a reality, not just a motion? So there's a whole range of things around automation, but there is also critically algorithm bias around recruitment and how AI will be used to recruit workers. There's racist technology that is already out there, and how are we going to make sure that we are on the front foot about that, that we don't hear about it and then react, that actually we are very up to speed in relation to that. So the bargaining guides, how that links into education, and all of those things around some of the issues that will affect our equality areas more, that we are on top of those and we are proactive on those. You'll also see there on the bullet there around translation services. This is something I think we're going to have to bite the bullet on. There are some online tools, and that's important, and we should do that. But this whole thing around barriers to becoming involved in the union, we have to take that seriously. And what are the barriers? You know, we haven't got, you know, an infinite pot of money, but what are the things that we can do? What are the things that we are practically able to do? And let's have a conversation about that. Moving on now to page 10, we talk about what I call a deeper democracy. And obviously, our union, I think, probably has a rich tradition of being a democratic organisation. Our rule book holds us to being a democratic organisation. But if we haven't really got people being involved in the union, in all of our structures, being part of the union, in all of the areas that we need them to be part of, then of course it makes that less accountable. That democracy is less accountable because obviously it's weakened in some way. And so I am looking to have what I call a democracy commission. This would have lay membership oversight to really see, are there barriers to people being involved in the union? What are those barriers? And how can we ensure that we have a richer democracy, that we ingrain it more, that we make sure that the democracy of our union is strong, and that our lay members have oversight in every part of our organisation. And you'll see on page 11, I give some examples of what that might look like. So I talk about the role of the shop stewards in our decision making. Is there a way to have even more shop stewards involved in our decision making? We talk about union policy and how can we make sure that union policy that you set here as the parliament of the union, that actually is then transferred, that happens, that, you know, when you come back and say this was a motion I put forward, what happened with it, then we're able to say, well, actually, these are agreements that we got from this, or this is what happened in relation to that. We also are talking about here procurement and obviously how we have procurement and transparency around that. And you can see their membership subscriptions. So obviously this has come up this week. There are a number of reviews taking place. So all of the areas of the union currently, so legal, subscriptions, benefits, everything is being looked at to make sure that it's focusing in at the right place. And of course, all of those areas will have lay membership oversight of those reviews. Moving now on to page 12, we come into the retired and the community part of the manifesto. And for me, these two areas are critical areas of our organisation. We have our industrial block, which is the powerhouse. We want to make it stronger so we can lead the pushback and lead the fight that we know that we're going to have. But of course, if the links between our industrial and our community, if the links between our industrial, our retired and our community can be stronger, then we know that when we're in dispute, we're in communities in dispute. And so therefore, can we have a greater link between our communities and our retired members and our industrial members? And if you move on to page 13, I talk a little bit first about the retired members. I worked many years ago, I was a lot younger then, I worked with Jack Jones for a long time. We both worked on universal benefits, everyone pays in, everyone gets out. And I worked with him for about 2 years on that programme. I learnt a lot from him, actually, and I worked with him on that programme. And one of the things that I thought was very good about what was happening at that time is that the retired members section led campaigns. They led the campaigns on different areas. So they led that campaign on universal benefit, for example. And what you see there on page 13 is, as well as all of the stuff that already happens in our retired members section, because already huge amounts already happen, we're also looking at, could we have a situation where we were giving budgets in to our retired members combined, so exactly the same as the rest of the organisation, and that we could have real joint working. So retail price index in the industrial field is a difficulty because of what it does to our pay, but it will also have an impact on pensions, on some pensions. So is there a connection that could be there? You'll also see I talk about mentoring. You'll also see I talk about a retired members conference so we can bring together our retired members and effectively say what are the core issues that we now need to campaign on, that we can put some proper resource and we can get out there campaigning. You'll see then on page 14, we talk about the community members, and this is really in relation to trying to link our community members into all of our areas of work. That happens a lot already, by the way. We've got some very good community coordinators. There's a huge amount. Every time I'm on a picket line, there are community members there as well. So a lot of that happens already. But how can we make the link greater between our community and our industrial members, and also into our political? So the idea for our community piece is that we effectively become much more part and ingrained in our communities, that we're not having to go to a community for a bit and jump onto another one and jump out somewhere else. Is it possible that we can use some of our resource to drive some of these wins in communities and to really try and make us part of the fabric of communities? Because if we do that, if we can become part of the fabric of our community and we have the industrial power block and we push those two things together, we then will be able to drive the politics, because of course we will be embedded in two hugely critical areas of our societies. Moving now on to page 15, we come to the section in relation to across our union. So this is looking at Ireland, Scotland, Wales and Gibraltar, Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. And there's a lot more detail in the manifesto around some of this, but I suppose just dealing with a couple of points around it, the first thing is really to talk about, could we, particularly in our nations, for example, if you take Scotland's the example that I give there, that Scotland is very near moving in terms of a national care service. There's a lot of work that's been done in Scotland. There's a different political system in Scotland. They're a lot more likely to get it than we are in England, that's for sure. And so therefore, on that issue, should we not be driving resource into Scotland so that we can secure that issue? So that in one of our nations, we have a national care service that is truly a national care service, and that we can get that secured. And then we can say in our other areas, well, hang on a second, they've got it in Scotland, so why can't we have it here? So to look at our union, to see where are the areas that we can pace it. Our nations is an obvious area in relation to that, but of course we have other areas where we can bring our reps and people together around that. Just moving now into the final section, really, on a workers' politics. And this, I suppose, was probably the most contentious area, I think, in the election. And just to sort of give you a bit of an idea about some of the thoughts behind the programme, you know, what we hope to do going forward. Of course, we'll be discussing all of these things with our different people in the different areas. But it was really about saying, look, we now are in a situation where there are no politicians coming over the hill to save us. And we are affiliated to the Labour Party, absolutely. We pay them money to be in a club. We're in that club and we pay them an amount of money to be in that club. And that is in our rule book and we do that. But on top of that, we also pay quite a lot of money into Labour. And the point that I was making in the election is that there shouldn't be blank cheques from Unite members that just gets automatically paid on top of our affiliation into anywhere unless we're getting something that is going to push forward what is happening to our members. So fire and rehire, for example, the National Care Service in Scotland, for example, issues where we need them sorted, where that is happening, shouldn't that be where we put that money? Shouldn't that be how we use that part of the political fund? We have a big political fund, and are there other ways to use that political fund? The other thing you see there is something that I've called a workplace manifesto. And when I had my conversation with Keir Starmer a couple of weeks ago, he was in my office, it was an hour's meeting, and I made it really clear to him that, these old wars, the stuff that they were doing, if they kept throwing grenades, then grenades would be thrown back. But what I am interested in is what are they going to do for workers? Because that's what people are asking me. What are you doing for workers and what are you doing for communities? And I want my agenda with Labour to be less about the internal wranglings that are going on and more about what our members are demanding from them. And so the piece around a workers' manifesto or a workplace manifesto is that the combines that will be there for our sectors and, of course, all of the areas in our regions that we'll be saying to our reps, what is it that you want from the political piece for energy? What's it you want from the political piece for finance, for the bus industry? And that should become what we demand. That should become what we drive because it's come from our reps and that's where it should come from. And so my conversations with Labour will be about what are you doing about these things because these are the things that my members are interested in. But further than that, it should be also to who's in power. Because we don't have time at the moment to wait for utopia. We've got to deal with what we have. And therefore, we want to make sure that we are able to drive these issues through the political arena. Fire and rehire should be taken out. Boris Johnson had a chance to do it in the Queen's speech. He didn't. He's got another chance to do it with Gary Gardner's bill on Friday. They won't. And so we've got to find another way of pressurising them to stop doing what they're doing and to drive through some of the changes that I'm talking about. And moving now on to the penultimate page on page 17, I just want to say a couple of things around some of the areas of Labour and local authorities, because this came up a lot in the conversations I had with reps up and down the country. And I think it's just worth saying this, because I think all of us in the room would agree with this, but I think it is just worth saying it out loud, that we are a trade union. And if our members, who are members of a trade union, are having pay cuts or cuts to services or anything that is happening that is detrimental to them, then we should fight that. If that was happening in any other part of our union, we would fight it. And so therefore I expect Labour to do better than what I expect a normal employer to do, and I expect them to treat workers in a better way. And so that includes local authorities and other areas. And the final thing that I just want to say before we go into questions is on page 18, which is about accountability. The way that I see my role, is that I want to be a hands-on General Secretary. For me, I see my role very much in the workplace. I see my role very much being on picket lines with workers where I'm needed. I see that being in negotiations with workers where they want me. And I see what I am elected to do is to be with workers in struggle and to put the union into a shape that we are focused in on the workplace. Of course, the political is part of that, and we drive the politics through the strength, quite frankly, that we build through our workplaces and our communities. So you can see there that, there are going to be some things I hope will be good, where I want to be much more accessible to the membership, where we have, regular question and answer sessions. I'm going to try and do that every month. I understand new technology will allow us to do that. I will be in workplaces. If people want me in workplaces, then obviously contact me and ask me to do that. So the programme is quite full. Obviously, like all of these things, these are parts of discussions that we have. You'll have ideas that I haven't even put in there that you'll think are better, that should be done in a different way. That's fine, because obviously that's how we create a strength of ideas together. The programme is designed so that we have more power, and that we have more power so that we can win for workers, and we can win for communities, and we can drive the politics at a time when, quite frankly, nobody's listening to what we are saying. And we need to put ourselves in a position that people will listen. So I will be standing with you, I'll be standing beside you, and I really look forward to the questions. So thanks very much for listening. Thank you.
Colleagues, now for the exciting bit.
Live wire active.
Colleagues, we've got around an hour. So what I'm going to do is get as many questions in. Can I just remind you, by the way, try and get to the point very quickly, and we can get more questions in. And the questions to be on, obviously, what Sharon just obviously spoke to you about. It's obviously her commitments. It's what she sees the future of the union, and obviously for us all to play a role in that, every one of us here to play. So make sure your questions are based on that. I'm going to go across, back and forward, starting with the North West. So can I have a couple of questions from people in the North West, please? I can't see. This is still just as bad, by the way. Ailey. Yes, Ailey. And they're there. No, Andy, you've spoken. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Yes, by Andy, yeah. Yeah. You two there. I'll take two from the North. Okay, we're going to have some people come on Zoom. I'll take them after we've talked to people from Mersey. A couple of people from... I'm going to the North East next. A couple of people in the North East to ask questions. They're out there, yes. And they're out behind. Is there any sisters there? No? Okay, we'll take with them. Is the mics ready for them people to speak? Where's the mics? Look, stewards, please, when we know now who's going to speak here. These two lads, can you be by them when it's their turn to do the question? Are you going to go first, Ailey? Is it working?
Yeah,
okay.
It's working. Hayley Brown from North West CAT. So, Sharon, we've seen over the years how the Unite Leverage campaigns have won in the fight to defend our members' pay terms and conditions against some of the most aggressive and hostile employers. Will leverage now become more accessible for all of our members in industrial disputes now that you've become General Secretary?
Okay. In the front here. If the people who are speaking when it's their turn stand up so they can see and get down to you with the mic as soon as possible. Not yet, you're not speaking yet. I'm going to take two here and then I'm going to come to you, sorry. Yes.
Hi, I'm Liz Holland from the North West.
The mic's not working.
Hello? All right, it's working now.
Got you.
Hiya, I'm Liz Holland from the North West, and my question's about the industrial membership system. I'm a branch secretary that covers over 1,000 members, and if I need to email them and follow the Gdpr recommendations, it takes me flipping ages. So if you can make that better, I'd be absolutely delighted.
Okay, and you stand up now. Yes.
So, a Labour Council removed facility time for our convener, which wasn't in the best interest for our members. After years of fighting, we've actually got that back. So my question is, what should we do if Labour politicians act against the best interest of our members?
Could you give your names, by the way, Colin, so that people can obviously keep up your names, sorry. Can you give your names before you start? We know where you're from, obviously.
Yeah, Abdul Rashid, North East Yorkshire on the side. So
Whatever Tolian. Whatever Tolian.
a question regarding education and training, really. It's what is your vision going forward for training and education for reps, in particular in equality? Also, could you clarify what you mean by education back in-house? Because at the moment, the tutors are not employed by the union, so is that changing?
Okay, I'll take those. So, Hayley, just in terms of leverage, I mean, the short answer is yes. It is going to be much more accessible. The disputes unit, department, call it what you like, is going to have people in there who are able to do leverage. We're going to train up more people to do it. Normally, when leverage is done, I tend to lead the leverage campaigns, but we need to make sure more people can do that. And I'd just say something about leverage because, you know, when you look at the papers, and they had a little bit of a riot going on the other week where they were saying leverage means you're outside directors' homes and all the rest of it. Actually, what they're scared about in terms of leverage is nothing to do with that. The issue around leverage is that we look at every single part of an organisation. And the reason that we've won 15 out of 15 leverage campaigns isn't because of a demonstration of that kind. It's because we've been able to say to the company, we know that you want to do this. If I take the Go North West dispute, they wanted to get a £3.8 billion contract in Holland. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get a rail contract in Holland for £3.8 billion. They were in the final stages of getting that, whilst they were firing and rehiring 500 drivers in Manchester. And we basically linked up with Holland. I spoke to their politicians there. I did some interviews with the papers there to say, actually, this company, you shouldn't touch them with a barge pole. And I spoke to Go North West to say if they didn't stop the fire and rehire in Go North West in Manchester, I would then continue with that. And they made a decision, £3.8 billion lose it, or affect what they're going to do in the Manchester depot. So the thing about leverage is it's exactly as it says, where we look at where the company makes most of its money and obviously where we can affect that and frustrate that in a real way, not just say we can, that we absolutely can. Now, I think going forward, that is going to be hugely important. You may never use it. You may never use the leverage document for your company. But to have it and to know regularly where your company's investing and what's important to them is important. So we will absolutely be doing that. Liz, you spoke about the membership system. And I think, you know, everybody would say it's one of the, everything's been reviewed, including the membership system, is that it was set up, I think, really for the finances of the union rather than for the industrial part of the union. And so, again, this will have lay membership oversight, but we need to make sure that the system, the new system, because it has to be different, it doesn't work as it is for our reps, has to be set up for the industrial part of the union. Now, Gdpr gets quoted regularly about everything, about not being able to have any data at all ever. I don't think it's like that. I think that for some things, for example, a branch secretary emailing their members, a rep emailing their members, we need to find out, is that allowed to happen? Can we do that? Because obviously they are the people you represent. So why can't you email them? So I think we need to dig deeper into what are you able to do as stewards to the members you represent, branch secretaries to the members in their branches, where you are really agents of the union, you are officials of the union in that sense, and can you have access to that data in a much better way than you do now? And that's obviously something that we're going to look at as we look at the membership system as a whole. Just in terms of the question about Labour, I think it's a very short answer. I mean, if we have a situation where Labour is attacking our members, then we shouldn't support that MP. We shouldn't give support. You know, if we're giving support... If we're giving support and money, our members' money, to people that are attacking our members, that's outrageous, and we should just not do it. And that's definitely my position, and I will be very strong on that. Just as far as education and training is concerned, this piece around bringing it back in-house is more, we've got fantastic tutors, so it's not around the tutors, it's really around the fact that a lot of the time when we're asking to do courses, they have to be in a particular way for a certain period of time. So, for example, in order for certain things have to be on them. Now, of course, more and more, we heard in the facilities debate today that actually people can't get any time off, let alone 5 days off, to go onto a particular course. So is it flexible enough as we're getting it? But also, are we able, I'd like to be talking to our stewards about AI. It's something that, as I've done for a long time, I'm very clear about how we need to push that industrially. Different sectors are going to have different things. I'd like to be able to have some of that on our training. And at the moment, it's been difficult to get that on. So it's really about, is the training going to assist what we need to do going forward? We have to be agile. We've got to be able to do bite-sized training. We've got to be able to get quick training courses in if we need to talk to people about particular industrial things that are coming down the track. So that's really the questions in relation to that. As far as equality is concerned, it's exactly the same. The issue around equality I was talking about at the rostrum was about development centres, where we're trying, certainly in our own organisation, in the union, we do not have enough black officers, we do not have enough Asian officers, we do not have enough women officers, and we don't look like the people we represent. We can't just say people don't come forward. That's not a good enough answer. We've got to find a way to see what are the barriers and why aren't people coming forward, and the development centres are part of that.
Okay. Scotland. Agnes, and I'll take the brother there, and we get back again. I've noticed you there, so if we get back around again, I will do. So Agnes and the brother, one there.
Thank you. I've been asked by the retired members to ask this question on their behalf. Chair Agnes Tolmie, Scotland. Sharon, you have talked about setting up an industrial mentoring project for retired members and establishing an annual retired members conference. Can you tell us how will that work and how will it fit within the wider union? Thank you.
And our brother there.
Hi Sharon, Scott Doyle, Scotland Region. Kind of two-part question just about the strategic direction of the union, but actually internally as opposed to industrially. And the question is, do you plan to have a review of the allocation of the national officers and putting the resource where it's required? Because obviously we've got a lot of companies and combines that are very good at self-serving, whereas there's a lot that need a bit more of the officers' time. And the second part of the question is, do you plan to review how we foster and develop talent within the union for the succession planning, particularly in the employed sort of officers arena, and looking at how we recruit and select officers going forward?
London Eastern, can we try and get people that haven't spoken, if that's possible, Colin? I can't see up there, so I might be pointing somewhere out that might have spoken. Is that the sister there in the front? Yes, yes. And is he someone who hasn't spoken, by the way? The brother at the back, the very back. Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's there. At the very back. Yes, that's it. Stand up. Stand up so you know who you are. Yes, that's it. You do the questions there when you take the phone.
Oh, right. Hi, everyone. Steve Edwards, London and Eastern, Hackney Council. Sharon, you've said a few things are under review from the union, which is good. One of the things I wanted to ask about was how the union views legal cases. As reps, we most of our work is casework, and there are cases, as you said, where our reps are being attacked, maybe cases on discrimination, etc., which they hold more of an importance as cases for the union, and members look at how we conduct ourselves in these cases. When they go to unions for legal review, often the response that comes back is they don't have reasonable prospects of success. So does the union plan to review how we and which cases we take forward. You know, sometimes when you're being bullied, you have to punch back, even if you may lose the fight. And by continually not taking on some of these cases, we are emboldening the employers to continue the attacks. Thank you.
Okay. He was at the front. No, there was the person at the... Someone have already picked out. Will the person that picked out stand up, please?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Sorry. Donna Guthrie, London and Eastern Region. My question's about action, not words, on the equality part of your manifesto, Sharon. And I really welcome being approached by phone call and email to raise a question about your manifesto in this session. I want to talk about the race pay gap reporting, because a year ago, last year in June, we saw the brutal police murder of George Floyd. This led to protests around the country and across the globe, and black people disclosing their everyday experiences of racism. And I want to talk about everyday experiences of racism in work. And we had companies up and down the country make statements to say they were going to tackle systemic racism in their employment practices, and their, black staff speaking out about how they're not progressing. And lots of black people in this country and our workers thought finally there's going to be actions, not words, which is what you've put in your manifesto. I work for a union, UCU, and black members called out the lack of black representation in senior positions. People have talked about it in our union as well, and you've echoed those sentiments today. Failures to carry out equality impact assessments is really important for black workers and people we want to attract into our union movement. We need to talk to people about their lived experiences, but we need representation as well. We need a union that looks like them. So my questions really were two. Can you say how Unite will lead by example, as the TUC have done, on race pay gap reporting and actions? Because the EC report to conference talked about gender pay gap reporting, but didn't make any mention to ethnicity or race pay gap reporting. And the second question was, can you say something about the toolkit for reps on equality impact assessments and making demands for race pay gap demands in our workplaces as well?
Great, thanks very much. So, Agnes, just on the retired piece there, so on the mentoring project, and of course this is something that at the moment I think happens quite informally. I think, where you've got reps who are retired from an industry, they may give informal advice to new reps coming in. The idea of it was particularly linked to the combine. So if you take aerospace, for example, and the agreements that we have in aerospace and the companies and the pay, the sort of pay within the industry, the agreements in terms of different pieces within the industry. What the idea was that actually a retired aerospace rep, maybe someone who just retired, could effectively come and speak to new reps coming in to say, look, this is how we fought for these agreements. This is what these agreements mean. This is what actually the undercutting of these agreements look like. Part of the combine structure is about pushing up and pace setting. If you've got the top 10 companies in a sector and they're all union and they're all organised and we've got all the stewards around the same table, then we can push industry benchmarking. But it's also to try and stop the undercutting. Because a lot of the time we're in doing agreements and sometimes somebody in one area of a company or a sector doesn't know that an agreement's happening in another area of that particular company or that sector. So it's really trying to, as I said, widen and deepen the collective. So there's the sector particular, but there's also about tactics. And, in a way, a lot of the things we're talking about now, combines, bringing people together, I mean, a lot of these things happened a long time ago. A lot of these things was how the trade union movement was born. We naturally had combines in some of our areas, albeit that they were more geographical than some of the stuff that we're talking about now. So are there things that we can have our retired members speak to our new reps coming in on some of the tactics they use, the collectivisation, how they won disputes, all of those things? That's a wealth of experience there in terms of that. In terms of the annual conference, this was really more about the campaigning part of retired members, because I want us to be, and I think we can be, the organisation that people say, well, look, Unite is campaigning for older people on X, you know, whether it be adult social care or whatever it might be. And that actually people are looking at us and saying, well, actually, you are the campaigning union. You are the ones out there driving on a whole range of issues, including what's happening to older people. So the idea of the conference was to decide for people to come up with what should those campaigning areas be, because there's no point us doing a press release saying we're against something, we're against this, we're against that, because we're running out of adjectives to say how much we're against of things. What we need to do is to have what we're against and a plan to try and stop it, because otherwise it looks as though we're just saying it and we don't really mean it. And of course, as much as possible, I'd like us to have campaigns in place with resource and that shows that when we say something, we mean it. You know, we are going to do these things, and that means priorities and all sorts of discussions with the different areas about what is it that you want us to do this on? What do you want this money spent on? You've got a budget. What do you want that to be the priority for? Scott, you spoke about national officials and resource, etc. I think it's absolutely critical for me. One of the most important things, as I said earlier on, that I stood on was about the workers' voice being heard and us being able to push back and to drive things through. And so I want to reallocate resource into the workplace, from the workplace out into the industrial. And so there are things. So the short answer is yes, we do need more resource in terms of the officers in a number of areas. There's a number of sectors at the moment nationally that only have one national officer when they have multifaceted parts of that sector. And actually that means that one area is maybe not getting some of the things that it needs to have. But there are ways that we can do this. Currently, you know, the review that we're looking at is looking at all the areas, for example, we spend on consultants. So I've asked for a list of every single area we spend money on that isn't in-house, because actually a lot of the time you could do it better in-house, quite frankly. But for some of it, do we need to do it? If it's not focused in on the workplace, if it's not focused in on what we need to do, then really is it something we can do without? And so therefore, obviously, we'll be looking at those things to make sure we can keep resource where it needs to be. Steve, you've spoken about, I think, a really important issue here, which is about the legal resource in Unite. And it's a very, very important piece of our armoury. It doesn't win us everything, because the law doesn't win us everything, but it is an important piece of our armoury. And one of the things that is an easy thing to do, and it's one of the things that I've already spoken to the legal team about, is this point you raise about reps. And I raised it when I was speaking. If we can't show that we can protect our reps, then we will have nothing left, because they're going to attack our reps. That is what is happening, and it's going to happen more than it's ever happened before. And so for me, unless it's something totally, totally abhorrent, like a racist or sexist or something that you could not defend, actually the 50-50 should be waived. Because quite frankly, if you are a rep and you are in a position where your employer is trying to get you out, they are trying to take the head of the union out. That's what they're trying to do. And therefore, there are times when we have to show that we fight, and actually in some of those cases, we will win those cases. And, you know, that should not be done on a computer says no basis. That should be done on the basis that this is a rep, the employer is attacking the rep, and that means we have to take that, unless there's a bloody good reason why we're not. So I absolutely can commit that will be happening, because we've already started that particular ball rolling. But it's also around the rest of our legal services. Is that getting into where it needs to be got into? Are we some cases that maybe we're not taking, we have to take to set precedent. We have to take to say, well, actually, we might not win this, but we're going to take it. So it's not as simple as a science with these things, as we know, because we are negotiators. There are times when I'll go into a workplace and I will defend members in a workplace who haven't been a member maybe for exactly the right amount of time. But that's because I'm organising in a workplace and I need people to see that Unite can come in and deal with this issue. And that's how we get the collective going, sometimes in a workplace where there is a lot of fear. So I'm very up for that discussion. I do think it's one of the most important things we're going to be looking at. And as far as reps is concerned, I can already tell you we're well down the road on that particular issue. Just, Donna, in terms of your point, and, you know, the action not words strapline was something, you know, when it took a long time to write the programme, as you can imagine, was something that I thought about a lot. Because, of course, you know, we're not saying, and of course we're not saying, that what we've done before hasn't worked. Of course we're not saying that. But there are things that we have got to try to make sure we are doing. So in the industrial arena, and I'll come back to Unite in a moment, but in the industrial arena, when you talk about racist technology, algorithm bias, ethnicity pay gaps, all of those things, gender pay gaps, they're happening in our workplaces now. That's what's happening in our workplaces now. So for me, it makes sense because a lot of equalities can be dealt with at the bargaining table. So we have to have reps at the bargaining table who will do that. But also what we have to have is a situation where we are pay setting that. So this was my point about, let's just take our BAM membership. You know, where is most of our BAM membership? Where is most of our women membership? Where is most of our disability membership? Because in those companies, that's where we should start pay setting these agreements and say, well, hang on a second, you're using this form of AI and actually it's completely biased against people who are black or it's completely biased against women. And so that we get these agreements in industrially and we pay set industrially as well as we pay set anything else like pay or any other thing that we happen to look at. As far as Unite is concerned, you know, one of the things that Diane and I spoke about, you know, in the first days that I was elected was the gender pay gap that exists in Unite currently. There is quite a large gender pay gap. It's more than the norm. And also the point around that we have to be reporting in all of the areas, but not just reporting, that we have to show what we're trying to do to deal with that. And that's the point that I made earlier on, that, you know, if you can't just say, well, look, nobody wanted to do it and it just so happened we didn't get anybody from this area or that area. We have to find out why that is. And we have to then put things in to deal with it. Development centres for me has been something that we have looked at quite a lot, and you know that's worked certainly for organising. We've got a very, very different mix of organisers than you looked if you looked at the rest of Unite, but it might not be a one-size-fits-all approach.
Now, colleagues, looking at my map here, East Midlands. Yes, in the pink shirt. There's one of our sisters there. That was supposed is your sister there? Have you got your hand up at the back? Oh, no. Is your sister there, colleagues? No. OK. The guy in the front there with the T-shirt with his hand up. Just stand up. Yeah, waving. Yeah, stand up. So take them too. You know, no sisters.
Yeah. Jack Bazaz, East Midlands. The question is around the combines. As we already know, we already have our risk sectors and the NISCs. On face value, it seems the combines, you know, combines is a great tool, but it seems like they will be in conflict with the risks. Now, the question is, how is that going to be implemented, and will there be clear guidelines on the implementations of how they're going to really be implemented without conflicting with the risk committees and the NISCs? Thank you.
Dean Collins, Health Sector, National Disabled Member. I welcome the dedicated development centre, particularly for disabled. We're under attack in the workplace constantly. Things take forever to get reasonable adjustments. Can you give me a bit more meat on the bones in the dedicated development centres? What tools, skills, knowledge you're going to give the disabled in the workplaces? And what time frames are we talking to deliver these centres?
Wales. Wales. The sister there, yes. And the sister at the back as well, yes.
So, hello. Hi, Anita Hamonda, Wales Region. My question is, the Welsh economy and our members are facing some enormous challenges, from the crisis of facing Welsh steel production through rising energy costs to the attack on the terms and conditions. These issues will be similar to other parts of the UK, but still sit within a Welsh context. How do you see Unite Wales and its industry priorities fitting into your wider industrial strategy for Unite?
And the other sister.
Caroline Price, Wales Region. Given that the Labour Party is in power in Wales, how does that fit with our future relationship with the party as a whole?
You talk about socialist Wales now.
Oh, was that two, was it?
Oh,
right, okay. Okay, sorry, Jack, I thought it was only two there. Okay, yes, Jack, in terms of combines. So this is probably one of the questions that come up the most in the conversations that I've had around the programme. So the first thing to say, which is important, is that all of the existing structures, the risks and the NISCs and our regional committees and our different areas across a number of different parts of the union are absolutely as they are now, because of course they have functions. There are things that happen in all of those areas that would need to happen, and that's not the work of the Combine. It's a totally different job that the Combine's doing. The big difference really between a NISC and a Combine, I suppose, is the negotiation. So if I take you back to the home working agreement that I spoke about in the banking industry, so I've been working with a number of stewards in the banking industry on putting together what would be a good home working agreement. How could we put together an agreement that didn't do some of the things that employers are now saying? That you should get paid less because you stay at home and that you're not having any travel costs. That you should get paid less because it's better for you to work at home. Or that you are having to work at home. And the way to get in good industry agreements is to have industry benchmarks that we would be calling for. If we had a Labour government, we'd be calling for industry benchmarks and sectoral bargaining. We're trying to create it outside of that. So if I take the banking industry, the 7 major banks, the stewards of those 7 major banks will come together. They'll agree what the home working agreement looks like. We'll table it at the 7 major banks at the same time. And we will effectively then drive that agreement through and say, HSBC, whoever, this is what Unite's home working agreement will look like. We're not accepting anything less than that. We normally use, as I said, a trigger agreement approach. So we have an agreement, there's a legal paragraph in it. It has the 7 banks listed because they make up the majority share of the banking industry. We say, OK, when you put your name to it, HSBC, we put it in the drawer, and when all 7 have signed, we then enact the agreement. So it's called a trigger agreement. So it's really a sectoral agreement that's done in a particular way. Now, obviously, we will get banks that will not want to sign, and those are the banks that we will concentrate our action on, our leverage on, and all of that sort of stuff to get the agreement through. So the big difference between the NISCs, risks, and the Combine is the negotiating body, so the reps that are coming together to negotiate in that industry. It may well be, as I said about road transport, logistics and warehousing, that when those reps come together, they say, well, actually, we're nowhere near putting one agreement in. What we want is Amazon organised, because that is undercutting everybody else. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's pushing down on everybody else. Had we had these combines in place, for example, when the HGV shortage happened, we would have been able to bring those reps together very quickly because there would have been a combine that would have been around drivers, and we would have been able to proactively move very fast. As it happened, we had to create the combine. We had to get the drivers together. I met with about 85 drivers a couple of weeks ago in order to put that plan together. But the combine should already have been in existence. So one is really about negotiation. The other is about setting all of the things that they would normally do in NISCs, risks and regional committees around all of the functions and responsibilities that they have. Lynn, in terms of the disability piece, and the development centres. And these are obviously all things up for discussion, but I mentioned development centres because it's something that I did an awful lot of when I was in organising. And what we used to do, if I wanted to make sure that people were able to come through as organisers, they were able to know what the job was, they were able to do all of those things, is that we took them through 2 days to talk to them about what the JD was. We spoke about all of the things they needed to do. We spoke about, did they want to come and work with the department for a bit? We spoke about the fact that, look, actually, you've come out of an industry where it's unorganised, but you are effectively acting as a rep. You are a rep in all intents and purposes. Just because you haven't got recognition doesn't mean that you're not doing some of those jobs. Sometimes people didn't recognise themselves as having the skills they needed to apply for the job because, of course, to be an organiser, you needed to be a rep, and therefore that was a barrier that we found was stopping people coming forward. In terms of the timelines, I would like these things to be in place by March next year. I would like us, I'm going to have conversations with the regional committees, I'm going to be speaking to the union across the board, but quite honestly, for a lot of it, it's a case of making the decision and doing it. For the combines in transport, for example, I think they'll be coming together now. They'll be started now. Construction probably will be started now. There'll be a whole range of them that are sort of sitting there waiting to be triggered in relation to that. Just in terms of Wales and in terms of the industrial strategy in Wales, I mean, the important thing, and I'll take Carol's and Anita's together on this, I think the important thing about our nations is to recognise that actually we are a stronger union for it. Because as I said when I was talking earlier, is that in England at the moment, we've got absolutely zero chance, quite frankly, of getting anything through readily and quickly. We can build things, we can drive things, we can try and push things through, and we've got to talk about how do we do that, how do we do that in a way that means we win, not that we just say that we want to do it. But for Wales and Scotland particularly, but also Ireland, is that there are things that we can do in those countries that mean that they pace set. So, for example, you have Mark Drayford. Of course, he is somebody that is totally different from who we've got in England, and that means you're pushing at an open door. So employment rights aren't devolved as much as we'd like them to be, but are there things that we can do in Wales that drives things through? If we're talking about steel and investment, how can we assist with that? How can we assist that happening? A lot of that will be from central government. But one of the things about calling for investment, and this has happened a lot to us in the past, where we call for investment for a particular company or a particular industry, the company gets the investment and proceeds to make the workers redundant or shut things down. And we've got to make sure that when we're asking for investment, that actually what comes with that is a jobs guarantee. That we want the investment, but we want the jobs. We don't want the investment for them to siphon it off somewhere else and our workers walk out the door anyway. So obviously in our countries, I think there should be much more autonomy, actually, in terms of how a lot of these pieces have done. I think there should be much more budgets in terms of how those things are done. What comes with that, though, is responsibility. Because obviously, if Scotland's campaign to drive the National Care Service is going to have some of more resource added into it because they've got a better chance of doing it than anybody else, then effectively there has to be accountability to that, and we have to be able to show that we can deliver that. But I think whether it's any of the nations, we work with what we have. If geographical combines make sense, for example, in our nations, because you have employers that are solely in those nations, then that's what we should do.
Okay. So, southeast, I can't see a thing down there. Can I ask people to put down to we haven't spoken yet? Is any of our sisters there? Can you stand up for your sister? Yes, sister there. And well, I think there's only two hands up. Anybody, I can only see one with the white shirt on. Can you stand up?
I am Tony, I'm standing up.
No, not you, Joyce. You're a good evidence, Joyce. I tell you what, Joyce, I didn't know it was you, honestly. Look, the lad in the white shirt, please. As well. The lad in the white shirt.
Greetings, delegates. My name is Charles Ogulami, Health Care Sector. Southeast region. May I use this opportunity to first say, to congratulate Sharon again on your new post. During your speech, you made mention of political pressure and changes. And to my knowledge, like a large number of our members are immigrants. And among these immigrants, we have a lot of undocumented ones. And I have two questions which I would like to ask. How will you extend these political changes and pressure to help the undocumented immigrants who are working in UK and are our members. In actual fact, it's legally observed that reps cannot advise under immigration rule. However, anyone can give information. So the second question is, in what way will you support reps to be well informed about such informations that will help the undocumented immigrants?
Okay, Joyce.
Yeah, Joyce Still from South East Region. My question is about your plans for education and the education department, Sharon. And I know that you touched on it, but you didn't really answer the question that I wanted to know. Basically, I've recently trained as a tutor, Sharon, with Ruskin College, and you've talked about bringing education back in-house. So my question is quite simple, really. Do you plan to use the tutor base that we have now, or do you plan to start from scratch with new people, so we'd have to do another training programme to become a tutor? Thank you.
Ireland. Where's Ireland? I can't see who you are, but so I'll have to take a chance here. The sister there, yeah, sister there. And we have a brother as well. At the far, yeah, no, the one in the back T-shirt here, yeah. So can you take you, Sue?
Hi Sharon, Bridie McCrish, Local Authorities, Ireland Region. Can I just turn around and say congratulations on the appointment as General Secretary. I look forward now to working with you. Mine's a two-part question. Do you think that this recent pandemic has fast-forwarded industry's plans for automation? And because of this, has our campaign on strategy changed in any way? Thanks.
And yes, the delegate, that's it, the delegate there, yes.
Yeah, you made reference to like organising the unorganised, specifically of the hospitality sector. You know, hospitality is obviously an industry where a lack of organisation has allowed for years, like the bosses, to be on the offensive and really lead the way in a race to the bottom in terms and conditions. So I just wanted to ask, like, what specific resources will be provided for organising hospitality? I think there's a real need for us to organise and to actually build branch structures in every region that are capable of stealing activists who can lead in the sector. So hospitality members across the union have a proposal that's backed by every leading member and officer in the sector, which calls for like bespoke organising resources with dispute support in comms, legal, research, etc. So just asking kind of what are the plans for resources for hospitality. So cheers.
Carl, just before Sharon answers them, by the way, we've still got 2 more regions, and I've got now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions on Zoom to go to at the end of this as well. So I'll get as many as we can in. So if you want to answer them, mate, I'm just letting you know where we are.
Yeah, okay. So Charles was the first question in terms of undocumented workers, and so I sort of look at this really in 2 ways. First of all is that we organise undocumented workers. So in fact, actually in the organising department, if I take the Cleaners campaign, as part of that campaign, we organised undocumented workers. We gave advice to undocumented workers because we had a principle that if somebody was working, they were a worker. And whether people classed them as different things was fine, but that wasn't how we were viewing them. We were viewing them as workers, and we were organising them, and we were dealing with their issues. So maybe, Charles, I'll speak to you afterwards about that, but there are avenues that we are already taking and have taken in relation to that. Also on the advice area, you know, we have a part of the union that does give advice in relation to that. So I'll speak to you afterwards about that and see if that's the sort of thing that you are referring to. Joyce, just on education, yes, it is the intention to use our tutors. I mean, our tutors are good tutors. They've been mainly stewards. All I'd say about the in-house is that, you know, this is one of those things that, you know, you try to do you're trying to do something when I was in my old hat, if you like, and what you were finding was it wasn't as simple for us to bring stewards together and train them on X because we had to go through processes that meant through colleges and all sorts of different things that made it much more complicated than it needed to be, but also that the course couldn't be as we wanted it to be. And so for me, we have things now that we are going to need to be training people on, but to bring people together, to have it done in different ways. It can't always be 5 days, all of those things that we've spoken about. And we have to make sure that the education part of our union, which is a phenomenal part and a phenomenal resource, of course it is. I came up through it as well. But we've got to make sure that it is going to be able to adapt to what we know is coming down the track. A lot of people that we represent are not in recognised workplaces. We've got 38,000 agreements with employers as we sit here, 38,000 agreements. In 2019, over half those agreements, so this is before COVID, over half those agreements did not reach RPI. In terms of their pay agreements. So over half of our 38,000 agreements where we're recognised with employers, over half of them in 2019 did not reach RPI. And that's before you get to the ones that aren't recognised. So of course what I'm trying to do in the programme is to try and give resource into the workplace, is to try and make sure that we're defending our reps, is to try and make sure that we've got mobilisation, that we are widening and deepening the collective, so that we don't have a situation that in recognised workplaces, over half of them, that we're not able to get an RPI increase, and prior to the pandemic I'm talking about, obviously this is pre-pandemic. And so obviously, Joyce, what we'll want to do is to talk to education, we want to talk to our tutors, and for me, I don't care how it's delivered, but what we can't have is a situation where we're trying to pull together stewards or they want a course on something really particular, and for whatever reason we can't do it because there's barriers in the way. So it's really about making sure that we can do those things. As far as the training is concerned, I mean, I don't know what the training that the colleges have given. If it's up to speed with what our reps need, then of course that's absolutely fine. As far as Ireland, Bridie, your situation around automation, I would say that, you know, for me, it is absolutely undoubted that employers are fast-tracking automation. If you take Stagecoach in the bus industry, which were the pace setters, if you like, of driverless buses, it was anticipated there would be between 6 and 8 years before that would really be anything that was real. There's been pilots in Edinburgh, there's been all sorts of different things. They've had remote driving, driverless buses, but they have put in, that company have put in a lot more investment to get to that place quicker. You've seen finance have put in a lot more investment to get to that place quicker. And COVID has made that the reality, because of course, you know, these pieces of machinery and technology don't get COVID. And we've got to make sure that workers get their piece of the pie. A lot of the intellectual property they are using on sort of sensory artificial intelligence, this is where somebody will pick up a phone in less than 5 years' time and we will have no clue that we're not talking to a human. It won't be like it is now where you can really hear it. And the reason they've been able to produce that sensory artificial intelligence to such a degree that we wouldn't know, it's answering you questions back like you're in a conversation, humming and hawing and all of that, is because it's listened to thousands and thousands and thousands of conversations of people, of workers, in order to create that technology. So it's our intellectual property they're using. We're getting nothing for it. And they're lining us up to basically dump people out of their jobs and not do what they're supposed to do. So I think that automation and how we deal with it, I think the sector approach I'm talking about is really important, because we go together, we have one agreement, for example, in a sector, and then we drive that agreement through. So the answer is yes, and I hope what I'm putting forward helps us with that. Just on hospitality, I mean, I came out of this industry a long time ago, and, you know, for me, I really believe there is a collectivity in hospitality that is there. I think that the difficulty with hospitality is the fragmentation of the employer structure rather than the fragmentation of the workers. What I've seen the document, in fact, I've spoken to Brian Simpson, we are going to pull groups of people together. I want us to run the campaign in hospitality. I've got a few, I think, ideas that I'm going to bring to the table about how we take the companies. So if you look at the sector of hospitality and you look at how it's divided, you've got about 9 major companies that have 60% market share. So the pizza companies are really broadly owned by the same company, even though they're different pizza companies. So should we be doing something similar to Amazon, where we're hitting at the share piece, we're hitting at the big owners, if you like, the decision makers, as well as us going in, obviously organising the workers. So I've got a couple of things I want to bring to the table on it, but it's absolutely one that's going to happen.
Colleagues, we've got just under 15 minutes and we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 questions. We get everyone done. I just want to make this point quickly, by the way, because I believe that some people on Zoom are having a problem over me coming here and not going to them. I'm taking 2 questions from each region. I told the regional secretaries to tell their delegation that on Sunday. And hopefully these people on Zoom were in there. But with the exception of one person here, which is the West Midlands person, everybody else has put a question in. I got them after their region had spoken. So I want to do my best to get as many in as I can. But if people haven't got me over the Zoom, that's fair enough. But there's only one person I can see on there who got their question in before I asked their region. So I'll get as many in as I can. So we're going to go now to West Midlands. It's just that people need to be a bit quicker, and it's unfair, I know that. Any sisters that haven't spoken? Yes, the sister there. Is it?
Hello.
I can't see. I just can't see. I'm going to have to go to the... Yeah, I've got the sister in the front here. Oh, fuck.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, and the sister behind. Okay.
Hi, I'm Lorna Burnham from West Midlands Health Sector. I work for a private company, and I find that they are putting the younger generation in worse terms and conditions and pay. I want to know is how are we going to get them joining our union and getting them as activists?
Okay, and the sister behind, and if you can make them always quicker, that'd be great. Thanks a lot, sister.
Hi, Christine Cartwright from Civil Air Transport. Sharon, I had the privilege to work with you in 2006 on the Flybe recognition agreement. It was also one of the first group of reps to beat the union busters. Flybe went into administration in March 2020. Obviously now a new Flybe has arisen from the dead. All the terms and conditions, agreements and pay scales have all been wiped out. What can Unite do to ensure that the work of the reps of 15 years is not through to the wayside, so that the new Flybe that has arisen can continue basically in disguise of your fire and rehire?
South West, where are you? Oh yeah. Sister there, I suppose that's... Sister in the red. And in the white, yeah. In the white, yes. And can you be quick? I'm sorry to put the pressure on you. I'm sorry about that, but I want to try and get at least some of the Zoom people in.
Hi there. So I want to ask about combines, because I work within the local authority, so I also work alongside Unison and GMB. So how is it going to work for me if the other unions are not on the same agenda as I am? Recently, obviously, we have the HGV drivers regarding their low pay. And I know the other 2 unions are trying to do a deal with just a pay upgrade, whereas me from Unite are trying to get a market factor supplement. So where do I stand? Because obviously I'm standing alone in that meeting.
Yes, quickly, please.
Simon Crew, Secretary of Bristol Finance and Legal Branch and a rep in the insurance industry. And although a lot of our offices are reopening, the world of work will never be the same again. Jobs are being advertised completely home-based, and a lot of my members are being given hybrid contracts, maybe coming into the office once a week, once a fortnight. And in the past, we've worked very well with desk drops, rep surgeries, recruitment stalls. And the question really is, how can we serve the members who are working from home, who we perhaps would never see, and reach the potential members who are working from home?
Quickly.
Okay, great. Tony's going to be quickly, so I'll try and say something. Okay, right, so just, Lorna, obviously this point around age rates, and this is something that I think we need to seek out. Because a part of what we're looking at in the equalities piece, for example, when I spoke about the ethnicity pay gap or the gender pay gap, these are things that we know are happening, but I can't at the moment point to an agreement and say that's an agreement we've got with X company that has eradicated the ethnicity pay gap, or that's an agreement I've got with X company that has done this. And that's why the industrial part of the equalities piece, and I'm including young members in this, the industrial part of the equalities piece is important because a lot of the time these things are dealt with at the bargaining table, but we have to be strong enough to deal with them, and we have to be organised in order to deal with them. So age rates, for example, all the companies where we have age rates, which is the point that you're making, somebody who is older is getting paid a different amount even though you're doing exactly the same job. Well, that's wrong. But loads and loads of companies up and down the land have them, but we shouldn't allow them. We shouldn't allow age rates in companies if it's not linked to proper training for our members. And so therefore it's about us doing campaigns around those, but particular ones, not just saying we're against them. What are we actually going to do company by company to defeat that? As far as the Flybe piece is concerned, you know, there isn't a shortcut answer to this. The only way that we stop our agreements being cut, that we stop what employers are doing to us, is that we have to build a collective. We have to be a collective in Flybe in the first instance, but also across that sector, so that we're able to push the employer back. Now, because aviation's in the position that it's in, it's not as simple as it was pre-2019 because of the way a lot of these employers are acting. This is where I think leverage is, it will never replace industrial action. It's not there to do that. But where you've got a situation where you can't push back because we're unable to push back, then these areas of leverage, I think, are going to be really important. So I'd really like to talk to you about Flybe particularly, because, of course, I think that we can bring something to that. The point that was made about combines and other unions, you know, where we're in multi-union situations, whether that be in transport or whether that be in the public sector or anywhere, is that obviously for me, and this is a short answer because of time, but I'd like to give a more detailed one, is that there are going to be situations where we are in multi-union situations, and sometimes there's situations where we're in multi-union situations and we're the smallest union. But I don't think that should stop us from trying to be the union that pace sets. Because if we're always thinking, well, look, we're not the biggest, or there's others there, and you know they're going to do this, so we can't really do anything, then we will never be able to break through that. We'll never be able to break out of that. So I actually think that on the combines, this should be part of the conversation. If I'm in a company, but I am in a multi-union environment, how can we support those members in that position so that we can have them as part of the campaign? How can we try and put something extra in the other side of that? Because just because we're the smallest doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't pace set and drive irrespective. And I'd say that about health and local government also. Just on the issue of the insurance companies, you know, this is another area, insurance, finance particularly, but there will be anywhere with a contact centre, quite frankly. This piece around the so-called hybrid home working, which means you work from home unless we tell you not to, is really happening very, very quickly. And for me, whether it's banking or insurance, the quicker we can get these insurance reps together, we already have the banking reps coming together, and to say this is the agreement that we believe should be there using the trigger agreement approach, putting the resource in to drive that agreement through, the quicker we do that, the better. And that doesn't have to take months. We can do that and talk about that next week because it's happening now. There's no point us putting that on the back burner. But there are things for everybody to know. On home working, there are some real issues about what is coming into some of these home working agreements from employers, which is really treating home workers like second-class citizens. And that will then suppress pay further, and it will drive down the rate for the job. So it's definitely something we need to be dealing with.
Colleagues, could I ask for your indulgence here? We've got 5 questions on Zoom, and if the people on Zoom, I ask them to get the questions in quickly, then we'll try and get answered. Can someone move standing orders until it's finished, and hopefully it's finished soon, please? If it goes on after 12 o'clock. Half 12, sorry. Is that okay? Thank you. Jason, can you go, mate?
Hi, Jason.
Are you there, Jace? Jason, please. Thanks for your waiting, mate.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Conference. Just a quick one regarding the NHS. There was very little in the manifesto regarding the NHS. What support and resources are Unite going to give NHS reps regarding the recent pay campaign, and how can we stop the increased privatisation within the NHS? Thank you.
Sharon Wilson from the North West.
From Northwest local authorities. In terms of the public sector, which is governed by collective bargaining, how does Sharon think a combine can help, for example, local authorities? Thanks.
Okay. Richard Miller from the East Midlands. Richard Miller. Have we got Richard Miller? Okay then, I'll move on to Esther from Scotland.
I have a question for the NHS as well. Sharon, congratulations on taking over as General Secretary. I'm interested in your view on how Unite can fight the relentless pressure on NHS and care staff. During COVID, as everyone will know, it's been all hands to the pump. And as soon as the imminent crisis eases, the pressure's on to clear the waiting lists. Then the crisis kicks off again, and so we go round and round. Our members are absolutely on their knees. The mental health impact is absolutely unsustainable. Staff are feeling morally obliged and at times, frankly, blackmailed to stand up post, no matter how much they're crumbling within themselves. And it's all as a result of successive years of frontline cuts, hospital downgradings, closures, wards being eliminated, etc. So I'm interested to hear how you think Unite can fight back against that, and what we do about the public expectation on the service, which the government are doing absolutely nothing to encourage a bit of realism over. Thanks.
And Jan Bassano from the South East. I hope you're well, Jan. You there, Jan?
I am. In the published manifesto, you acknowledge that we need to adapt for underrepresented groups to feel included. So from my point of view, and I think a few people I've spoken to who've been in the conference hall, it's disappointing that there's no signers and subtitles available at conference when it's been previously available. And also, some people are not able to attend in person because there's no creche facilities available. So that, for us, has been disappointing because it kind of feels like a backward.
I think we got the gist of that. I hope we got the gist of it. Anyway,
I did, yeah.
Is Richard Miller back? Or has it gone for everybody? Richard Miller?
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, Richard.
Dead quick one, yeah. Just if Sharon would expand on how do you see the community members playing a role in the wider industrial strategy of Unite? Because I think that could be a fantastic resource for us, and they often are. That was it.
Okay, right, so I'll try and be as quick as I possibly can. I think in terms of Jason, Sonia and Esther's question, because they're relatively similar around the NHS and local government and the combines, I actually think for where we are now in our public services that I'd probably go a step further, because we have never, as far as I'm aware, and I've spoken to a number of people about this, brought together all of our local government reps or all of our health reps. And whilst a combine is there to try and look at, you know, for public services, you could talk about the top trusts, you could talk about wholly owned subsidiaries, you could talk about countries, and you could do it in all different types of ways, and that will be decided by the different sectors about how they want to do it. Right here, right now, actually, I think it goes beyond that. I think what we need to do is to bring together our local government reps, bring together our health reps, and talk about what is it that we now need to do in terms of what is happening in these areas. Yes, we have the pay issue that someone's discussed, and you know, I'm more than happy, and I've spoken to the sector about this, about us putting resource in, about us putting leverage in, and all of those things. So that, in a sense, is a bit of a no-brainer. The question is, what is the long-term plan for Unite in public services? What do we want to be doing over the next 5 years, not just over the next 5 months? So part of the conversation I had with Gail, but also in terms of some of the other areas, is about can we now bring together our reps from across these areas? Is it possible? How many are there? How would we do it? So that we can begin to put a plan together. It's not going to be one person coming up with this. This has been going on for years, and we now need to try to do something to drive that forward. Just, Jan, in terms of your issue, I mean, the difficulty when you're sort of been in, I mean, it's a bit of only been in for a couple of weeks. This is a bit hand in glove when you're coming into a conference. But effectively, I'll make sure, obviously, that there will be signers, etc., and I will make sure that happens. On the creche facilities, I think this sort of links into what Agnes was saying yesterday, that we do have agreements in terms of childcare, carers, and that should extend. Now, I don't know what we have and what we don't have. I'll have to look at that, but I will speak to Diana about that, and I will come back to the conference via some mode of communication to say what we can do about that, because we shouldn't not have people here because there's barriers to them coming, and that obviously is something I will take a look at and report back to you. Richard, just in terms of community, probably a really long answer, and I haven't got time to give a massively long answer, but what I would say is that for me, these powerhouses that we have in our union, no other union has got the breadth that we have got. It's 19 sectors, 7 critical infrastructure areas, some really critical parts of public services, the reps that we've got. That industrial part and the resource being plugged straight in, along with the community, a very, very particular part of our union that no other union has. But, in some ways, we need to reinvigorate the community part. How can we link it to the industrial, but also how can we create to be much more part of the fabric of communities, that we're not just coming in and going out? What does that look like? And I'm intending on bringing together our community branches, our community members. That will be decided how that's done, a representation of, to talk about how do we do that? How do we do that over the next 3 and 5 years?